The issue of managing a video game follow-up is a universal one across all scales of production. Fans want more of the same, but not too much. They want a budding series to evolve and grow, but not to fundamentally change. In some cases, a sequel arrives that gets the balance just right, but often expectations are outrageously high and disappointment is all too common. Whether because they took off in a strange new direction, lacked that star quality that came before, or were just mediocre, I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 most disappointing video game sequels of all time. Number 10, Paper Mario, Sticker Star. Longtime players of the Paper Mario series generally know what they're getting into. A colourful, irreverent experience that leans into the whole everything is made out of paper concept and emphasises it throughout. For many, 2004 GameCube title Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door represented the pinnacle of that format. It's tremendously fun and varied, with a large cast of characters that each have handy abilities in battle. The RPG elements seemed finely tuned to allow for strategy without becoming too deep or too shallow. Titles since though seem to have failed in getting this delicate balance right. 3DS installment Paper Mario Sticker Star remains a controversial example, leaving behind those RPG trappings for the gimmicky titular sticker system, and being a landmark disappointment because of it. It might not be too bad a title, the stickers can be fun to experiment with and the writing is on point, but talk about a drop-off from what came before. Number 9, Prince of Persia, Warrior Within. Okay, full disclosure, I always loved this game. I mean, look at me. Godsmack's I Stand Alone as the theme song, gaming did not get any better. Talk to anyone whose blood didn't bleed professional wrestling at the time though, and Warrior Within was a cataclysmic, nigh hilarious letdown. Going from the super charming Sands of Time original to this weirdly super angsty muted colour palette sequel that felt like the boss's teenage son had led the design meeting. Because to give the haters their due, Sands of Time was a magical fairy tale game, boasting fantastic platforming sections that showcased the prince's remarkable athleticism and time powers. Controlling the sands let you rewind to undo deaths, or bust out some sand powers in combat. Warrior Within then largely nailed its combat and level design, but went so all in on a Jak 2 or Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness style tone that many players just couldn't accept it whatsoever. Losing the softly spoken prince that went before, follow-up Two Thrones attempted to hybridize the two styles into a twin gameplay approach. However, that just resulted in a reboot because Ubisoft couldn't think of a genuine way to truly move forward. Number 8, Dragon Age 2. The Dragon Age series represents BioWare at their best, a deep, involving set of RPGs with choices, consequences, and lots of dialogue. It's a version of the legendary developer we may never see again, but that hot streak run across the 2000s is always worth admiring. Dragon Age 2 then represents a turbulent time in the series. Hawk's adventure is one that never quite seemed to know what it wanted to be. It offered the player more freedom than before in terms of the choices they made, but its questionable pacing meant that you were never quite sure how or when they would actually matter. Most egregiously, Dragon Age 2 struggled to carve out a world that was truly its own, with some very familiar looking settings popping up throughout. It's a shame as Hawk is a memorably written character for those who stuck with the game until the credits, but this sequel was the first major stumble for a studio that would only fall apart more across the ensuing decade. Number 7, Resident Evil 6. There will always be highs and lows for any long-running series. In the case of Capcom's beloved survival horror franchise Resident Evil, the 6th numbered release would probably qualify as a major low. Resident Evil 4 had changed the formula forever. It implemented a new visceral action focus to proceedings and pulled it off with purpose, charm, and memorability. It's one of the most celebrated games ever made, and the pressure of following it up was pretty immense. In attempting to do so, Capcom gave us Resident Evil 5 and 6. The former may not be a masterpiece, but it remains an enjoyable enough action-heavy romp, packed with some of the most absurd and memorable moments the series has to offer. Resident Evil 6, though, just took things too far. Trying to please what had now become two audiences, those of slower-paced horror and high-octane action, none of Resident Evil 6's smaller campaigns felt like Resident Evil at all. Capcom would take a long, hard look at themselves across 5 whole years of letting the IP rest before coming back stronger than ever with Resident Evil 7, Village, and an ongoing smattering of remakes. Whether they try to make 6 work after all this time, though, is something we'll just have to wait and see. Number 6, Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2. Adaptations of beloved franchises like Star Wars need to be treated with tremendous care. Fans are as invested as it's possible to be, and for Star Wars, they want authenticity across their games. The most iconic characters, vehicles, and locales, combat that feels just right, plus epic space battles and cosmic drama worthy of the name. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 had a great chance to deliver all of this. An expanded take on new canon character Starkiller could have been a visceral treat to control as before, with many expanded force powers and lightsaber tricks going down in history. Sadly, the game was a big critical disappointment, failing to refine the solid foundation the original had set down. It would later be revealed that the game was crunched to hell and turned around in just 9 months, something that resulted in Force Unleashed 2 feeling like DLC. Poor sales followed, and when Disney took over Star Wars in 2013, plans for Force Unleashed 3 were scrapped entirely. Number 5. Duke Nukem Forever. A lot was riding on 2011's Duke Nukem Forever. It needed to honour the Duke's not-so-good name and prove a worthy addition to his adventures that had come before. Sadly, the project just seemed doomed from the start. Duke Nukem Forever's sad fate is one of the most infamous tales of development hell in gaming history. Once it finally arrived in players' hands, it was plain just how far the genre had come, leaving the Duke far behind. Forever was filled with some insanely outdated jokes likely written almost a decade prior, and was a very basic FPS, failing to provide any innovation or a fresh feel to gameplay like the mighty Duke Nukem 3D once did. Number 4. Mass Effect Andromeda. Is it terrible to mess up once like with Mass Effect 3, or mess up again when you're afforded a clean slate? Answers down in the comments, because like I said earlier, BioWare did have one hell of a decade across the 2010s. 2017's Mass Effect Andromeda then was ultimately a victim of its own hype or expectation, which is to say that if you had any, you were disappointed. The issue was with how weirdly undercooked the game's marketing was, but quadruply so once we saw just how little care and attention had gone into this supposed soft reboot. Receiving a ton of patches as DLC was cancelled, and we found out behind the scenes squabbles amongst BioWare dev teams were rife, EA declared Mass Effect as a franchise on ice, until December 2020 promised at least something would come again. Number 3. Devil May Cry 2. Few games debut with so much confidence, swagger, and all-round panache as Devil May Cry. Spinning off from a Resident Evil 4 prototype and including enemy juggles as a game mechanic thanks to a bug in development, tagging on a red coat wearing demon hunter who quipped and flipped in equal measure was instant gaming history. It was all massively helmed by one Hideki Kamiya, director of Resident Evil 2, who'd go on to make some of the most stylish games of all time. So what to do for Devil May Cry's sequel? Well, how about you get in a completely different director, then swap another in with only a few months before launch. The resulting version of Devil May Cry 2 had wall running and multiple enemy targeting, but precisely none of the raw playability and appeal of the original, replete with a Dante that felt stripped of all personality. Number 2. Fable 3. On its 2004 launch, this vast, ambitious, Peter Molyneux-designed RPG delivered creative, engrossing gameplay. In itself, many had an issue with how overblown Molyneux's marketing tactics had been versus the reality of the game itself, but being a major, well-playing Xbox exclusive RPG, en masse we kinda just let it slide. Fable 2 then hit supremely well too, leading to a Part 3 that got everything wrong. Lacking the weighty decisions that made Fable identifiable, also stripped back were your clothing options, weapons, and RPG customization across the board. Even the game's pause menu was just weird, booting you into a room of options that you literally had to walk around. Fable is currently in reboot mode yet again after the practically finished Fable Legends was shelved instead, but Fable 3 was a monumental letdown. And number 1, Dead Space 3. There's Resident Evil 4 and there's Dead Space, the perfect twin over-shoulder shooter combo. For the latter, Isaac Clarke fights with salvaged mining tools, battles are frantic, gross, and gory, and there's a killer atmosphere that brings it all together. For Dead Space 2, everything got enhanced. Combat proficiency, animation, monster design, lighting. For many, Dead Space 2 is the peak of action meets horror in all of gaming to this day. With so much love for 2 installments creating one hell of a trajectory, in came what we now know all too well as EA royally messing everything up. Series creator Glenn Schofield was long gone, and in were premium currencies, microtransactions, co-op shooting campaigns, and an evil moon as a boss fight. It all went sideways fast, undoing all that previous goodwill and benching Dead Space as an entire franchise until EA finally greenlit a remake in 2021. And those are our picks for the most disappointing video game sequels of all time. Let me know your favourites down in the comments below, and please subscribe to the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.